Rachel, thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
It's really great to get to know you a little. I've been really appreciating your powerful, I'm going to say powerful position that you're taking. It's not an easy thing, I think, at the moment to be standing up and speaking truth to power, but you're doing a fantastic job, and I'm really grateful for just how you're bringing different strands of information together and being a really reliable source of information, I feel.
Thank you. Thank you. It's nice to be appreciated.
It's hard to know like who to listen to, and there's just so many different varying opinions. It's great to find someone that really seems to see all the perspectives of everything but still not be in fear.
Yeah, for sure. That is the key thing for me, is really feeling when I'm falling into, when I'm going into that spiral of anxiety and fear, and it's just noticing that and reversing it and clearing it, you know. Yeah, so it's a key thing at this time.
So just quickly, because there's a lot of things I want to talk to you about, but just in case people don't know you, do you want to give a quick introduction to who you are and what you've been doing in your life?
Yeah, well, my whole life has really been in and around business. I trained in accountancy and then started my first company, Red Letter Days, at the age of 24, and built it into this market-leading multi-million turnover brand. And that got me on Dragon's Den, winning awards. And I was also kind of exposed to the big corporate world as well, which I think was a real eye-opener for me, because there's a huge difference between small business and the big corporate world, which is why when the whole COVID thing unfolded, because I understood how big corporate works, the mindset and the way you know, the way that world works and how ruthless it is, I very quickly realized that this was a hostile global corporate takeover bid, essentially. And so I see it through that lens of business, really.
So you weren't really politically active before all this started, and you just made a video, right? And it went viral, and did you just find yourself in this position of being a kind of spokesperson for people?
Well, I have sort of touched on the world of politics in the past. And in fact, I was invited to stand as an MP by David Cameron, or as part of David Cameron's initiative, Women, I think it was called Women to Win, back in 2006. I even spoke at the Conservative Party conference. But I also realized, I saw how Boris Johnson had sort of hijacked the Conservative Party. And in fact, in the last election, I really was rooting for Jeremy Corbyn, because I felt that like what it needed was a non-corporate person. But I, you know, so that was the extent of my politics, really. But when I started to see what was truly going on, and I was quite angry and outraged. Yes, in September 2020, I was so angry. I just went out and filmed this video that was not scripted. It was just a rant, really, like a 25-minute rant, and put it out. And it really resonated with people, and it kind of went viral, and it got banned by YouTube and Facebook, but only after it had about 250,000 views.
Wow.
And so it just opened the floodgates for a whole following. And so many people saying, wow, you are speaking to exactly how I'm feeling. Like those are the things that I've been feeling, and someone's actually articulated it. So that video was sort of captured the zeitgeist of the moment. So I built on that and just started researching ever more deeply and doing more videos. And then I started doing an open forum, which I call the People Speak Out. And that's every fortnight on a Monday, and I just open it up, and people from all over the world come on that. There's only 100 seats on those calls, but they're always fascinating. And the thing about them is, because I never know who's going to come on or what anyone's going to say. It's all completely random, unscripted. And the beauty of them is just they're all really normal, decent, like average people. You know, they're not militant or rabid kind of activists. They're just normal people who who are in the heart and really seeing through the lies, you know, and questioning and awake. So it's really beautiful to see so many people all over the world now waking up to not just COVID, but how rotten the entire system is and how corrupt.
Brilliant, brilliant. So it must be taking up a lot of your time now. Do you feel like you've been kind of thrust into this role, or is it really still coming from the heart, like you're so passionate about getting this information out?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm in the fortunate position that I don't have to hustle for money, and I get that I've been put in that position so that I can devote my time and energy to it. And I haven't monetized anything that I've done in this world of freedom, the freedom movement, because I don't want anyone to be able to say, oh, she's just doing it for the money, which would be an easy thing. Oh, she was in business, she's just looking to make a quick buck. So for that reason, I haven't even got a Patreon or anything like that. So I think it's really important to, especially as we're dealing with corruption, and especially as everything is about money. If you follow the money, everything about this is rooted in money and greed, actually, in power. So it's actually been very good for me that I have been able to devote time, such a gift to have been able to devote a lot of time, both on input, I've read and watched and absorbed a lot of content over the last, I don't know, 18 months. And I also then put a lot of content out. So the best bits of things I read, I put in Rachel Speaks Out, which is my Telegram channel. And then frequently I will do videos, which are sort of commentary on what's going on. Yeah.
Which is the only Telegram, well, the first Telegram channel I always look at, I have to say.
Oh, thank you. The first one I always look at is David Avocado Wolf. I think his is the best Telegram channel by far. And it's like an entertainment channel, David Avocado Wolf.
There's so much on his, and it can just if you just condense it. That's what I like, is you've usually got just like maybe half a dozen posts every day, and it's like, okay, these are the highlights.
Yeah, exactly. It is. I am like The Week. I don't know if you've ever read The Week. It's a weekly magazine which is the highlights of all the newspapers. It's a genius thing. So yeah, my Rachel Speaks Out is kind of like The Week. It's the highlights of all the best bits.
Yeah.
From what because for everything I post on there, I probably see about, I don't know, between 10 and 20 different things, and I post the best of the crop. Yeah.
So this isn't an easy question to answer, but if you can just kind of condense it down for us, and obviously, you know, we'll get into what's happening at the moment, because there's so much great stuff happening just since the beginning of the year. It's unbelievable. Well, it isn't, it's totally believable. It's totally wonderful how, you know, the things that you and I have seen to be what's happening and have had to kind of really fight our corner for, is now becoming much more accepted and much more understood through people like Rana Fulmick and Mark Sexton and Sam White. But can you, from your perspective, kind of condense for us what you see has happened in the last 2 years?
In the last 2 years, I mean, I can answer that question from a sort of 3D point of view, and I can also answer it from a metaphysical point of view. So from a 3D point of view, as I said, when I read The Great Reset by Klaus Schwab, I very quickly realized that there was a strategic master plan not in that book that all, well, maybe not all, but most of the 193 countries in the world had signed up to. And they had all been signed up and given essentially a strategic operations manual with everything, all the scripts and everything to implement this Great Reset plan, down to things like legislation, boilerplate legislation, which, you know, every country has done the same thing in lockstep. So I quickly realized it was a global corporate hostile takeover bid. And of course, that all of the key political leaders had been carefully positioned, groomed by the World Economic Forum Young Leaders Programme, and put in strategic roles like Justin Trudeau, Jacinda Ardern, Macron, Boris Johnson, definitely on the payroll of the elite. Biden bankrolled into position just to sock puppet, basically. So all of these key, politicians, leaders, have been put in these positions. And so as soon as Boris Johnson won the election, it was like they said, right, we've got the final chess piece in place and we can press the button on it. That was my sense of what happened. And so we are basically now seeing the New World Order, bulldoze, the attempt to bulldoze through the New World Order. So that's kind of what's happening. But of course, this is the interesting thing about the Great Reset. In that book, it anticipates societal unrest, but it says it will come with violence. And this is the big fly in the ointment of the Great Reset. The Klaus Schwab didn't anticipate that the uprising would be so peaceful. And the fact that it hasn't been violent is a massive fly in the ointment, because all of the violence has been on the part of the police. And because there's no violence, they can't justify martial law, or they can't just, even the Police Act that they tried to bulldoze through was rejected by the House of Lords. So that's one huge thing in our favor, is that the uprising has been completely peaceful, and it's been really beautiful to witness.
Can I just ask you, before you carry on, do you recommend people read that book? Is it heavy going, or the Klaus Schwab?
Well, I read it right at the beginning back in 2020, and I re-looked at it again because I did an event this week and I was talking about it. So I actually revisited it because I gave my original copy away. And the uncanny thing about reading that book, unless Klaus Schwab is an absolute psychic, you can tell the whole thing's a plan. You can tell the whole thing. It's a piece of propaganda it's the masterpiece of propaganda that was sold into the 193 countries to justify the Great Reset. And it's for public consumption, and there's obviously a strategic plan which was not for public consumption, which is what is being implemented. So it is quite turgid, but it's an interesting read, because when you read it, you just really, the penny just drops massively, if it hasn't already, that the whole thing is a setup. So anyway, so that's my answer on a sort of 3D level. But I just wanted to talk about the metaphysics of it, because 2020 was a metal rat year, yang metal, and in sort of feng shui, Chinese horoscope terms. So yang metal is big metal, like skyscrapers, 5G masts. It's the structure, it's the system. And then 2021 was yin metal, which is like vaccination needle, fine metal. But we've now just come out of those two metal years, which are all about the patriarchal structure, and we've suddenly come into the water tiger year. And the shift in energy has moved from this structural metal to this tsunami of yang water, which literally is like the ocean or a tsunami. And it's like a huge river that can just sweep away anything in its path. Or if there's a rock, you can just flow around it, So this uprising of the people, and especially what's going on in Canada, and to an extent in New Zealand and Australia, because they have the harshest regimes. Because it's almost like what's happened, and it's a classic corporate thing, is because the wheels were coming off the plan, it's almost like all the countries have split into focus groups. So in Austria, we'll do this, and in New Zealand, we'll do that, and in Australia, we'll do this, in Canada, we'll do this, in the UK, we'll do something else, to assess the response and reaction of the people, because they are needing to regroup and work out the next. They're not going to give up on this. So it's almost like they're retreating from this battle so that they can regroup, reassess, and strategically work out the next wave of attack. That's the way that I'm seeing this, because this Great Reset is a 10-year plan. So it's for implementation by 2030. And we're 2 years in, so this is a war. It's a lot, and we're in for the long haul. But the thing about this water tiger energy is that it's shifted. And so this water, this rising of emotion and people and the tiger energy is powerful. So this uprising of the people, it can't be stopped, you know, this, and it is an awakening of consciousness without a doubt. So it's a very exciting time to be incarnated, actually. And when, you know, with yang water, it's like a white water raft ride. When you just let go and just enjoy the ride and just get in your raft and go, woohoo, like we're off, we're just going to go down the river and we're going to enjoy the ride, even the scary bits. That, you know, that's, I think, most people who are awake, which is getting to be a critical mass now. That's all it needs, a critical mass. Boom, and everyone will get it. Yeah. You know, it's a quantum leap of evolution. That's what we're headed for.
Yeah. But let's get really metaphysical, because something you mention now and then, which I really understand as well, is there's like dark forces at work. Some people call them the archons or Wetiko. Can you explain that to people that might not be familiar with that concept and how you see that playing out?
Yeah, it's a very fascinating subject. And I first came across Wetiko by reading Paul Levy's book, Dispelling Wetiko, Breaking the Curse of Evil. And it's a very fascinating book about lower vibrational, non-local, non-human energy, which is looking for, it's like parasitic, low vibrational energy, which is looking for hosts to work through. And so if you're a highly traumatized person who's not aware, not enlightened, not conscious, not particularly conscious, Wetiko, it's almost like a parasitic energy, like entity attachments. If you've ever worked in that world of shamanism, you know, entities can attach. It's like a parasite. And so this Wetiko, which every culture has its own name for this Wetiko, as you said, Ahrimanic or Archontic or Jinn or Satanic, you know, all of these different names are the same essential energy, are names for the same essential lower vibrational evil energy. So if someone's highly traumatized, and let's face it, to get to the top, either in business or in politics, you need to be quite a highly driven, quite a highly traumatized, desensitized person who's probably got masses of frozen trauma, who can't feel empathy. So you get highly ambitious, ruthless people who are all about power, control, winning, and getting the job done. And they can't feel, because it's frozen trauma. So if you have a lot of frozen trauma from childhood, you literally can't feel. You can't feel compassion and empathy. So this Wetiko energy finds it very easy to work through those shells of people. And so you know, the nth degree of this is to actually feel compassion to people who are in the grip of this entity attachment. Because I spoke to an amazing person on this, is John Lamb Lash, who's an amazing narrator for this time. And I was talking to him about the whole of the COVID pandemic. And he said the only way to truly understand what's going on at the planet right now is to realize that the energy we're dealing with is not human. This isn't human energy. This is dark, lower vibrational, non-human, non-local energy working through shells of people. And when you realize that, it becomes easier to get what is going on. And it's quite frightening and shocking, actually.
That's how the psyops works, right? It's because they understand how to manipulate, as you're calling it, the frozen trauma, in order to make people obedient to these rules that don't make sense. But that's what they kind of worked on with the MK Ultra programming, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's military grade psyops that is being employed now to trigger people into fight, flight, and to create as much fear, as much dissonance as possible, which is why the antidotes for this, things like being, you know, really focusing a lot of energy on how to hold your center and not be pulled into fight flight, you know, doing that inner healing work so your window of tolerance is as wide as possible, so you can really, you don't have to fall into fight flight. Things like meditation, things like resonance, music, singing, chanting. That's why the marches, I mean, I've only been on a couple, but that's why they're so powerful, because everyone is singing and they're drumming and chanting and laughing, because it's all resonant. It's not violence and anger and fight energy. So this human spirit, this awakening of the human spirit, this awakening in consciousness, this great awakening is actually the wonderful byproduct of the Great Reset, because that's one thing he didn't mention in the book, The Great Reset. There's a bit about individuals and human nature, but there's nothing about spirituality. And they haven't anticipated that what this pandemic has had the effect of doing is just creating this massive awakening of consciousness. And it's just beautiful. And you know, maybe that is the hidden gift in all of this, that we're all finding our heart, you know, finding our compassion, speaking our truth. You know, that's hugely healing, especially if you've never been able to speak your truth before. So many people are finding their voice, and truth has a resonance, you know, and that resonance of truth, it truly is the arrow that can drive a stake through the heart of the evil. So you know, shine, you know, you don't have to fight the darkness, you just turn on the light.
It's an acceleration, isn't it? Because I've been on this path my whole life, and I was really aware and I knew a lot of stuff, but I've learned so much in the last 2 years, and also done so much work on myself. I've done so much yoga that wouldn't have happened if we were in pre-2020. So it's an acceleration of the energy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a really amazing time to be incarnated, you know, and everyone says we chose to be here at this time. So it's like really stepping into everyone's got their individual role and their individual power. You know, mine happens to be speaking and communication, and other people, you know, other people are all about healing, natural healing, holistics, and some people are all about music and resonance, and just did some amazing vocal work with Rabbit at the weekend. It's the power of sound and teaching people to sing. It's just super heart-opening and amazing work.
So I know it's not wise to make predictions. I don't want you to take on a role of prophet, but from your perspective, like what do you see is going on at the moment? Like, how do you see the landscape currently?
Well, it's, you know, there's one thing I will say about the current time. One thing I'm noticing, there's a massive amount of interference, there's a massive amount of fakery and confusion deliberately being created, because that's part of mass formation psychosis. And so I'm noticing that it's being pumped through. So for example, on Telegram, you know, which is probably the best channel of the social media channels, but it's starting to get really contaminated because they are attacking it through just bots and spam, and it's relentless. And I'm constantly having to kind of clear my Telegram channel. So this watching out for what has the resonance of truth and what feels off, what feels to be a little bit dodgy and dissonant. So this is a very important thing for us to develop, this instinct of feeling, because this is part of, you know, somatic experience of not thinking. It's like Bruce Lee said, don't think, feel. Feeling, you know, is this genuine? Does this have the resonance of truth, or is this fakery? So my sense is that they are pumping huge amounts of fakery and dissonance into the grid, both in terms of content and people, and decoys, people who look to be on, you know, our side, but maybe are plants. So it's a very interesting, so it's almost like walking through a labyrinth, and be just very, and this is I'm doing a lot of meditation and stillness. So this slowing down, so before you instantly hit, share on something, just like just holding that space and slowing down and just looking a little bit more closely. Is this true before I share it? Or am I just being triggered into, it's triggering me and I'm just going to share it? So this slowing down is a really important part of that process. But there's no doubt in my mind that now that they've pressed the button on this great reset, and there's a lot invested in this new world order and driving it home. So the next question is, what is the next wave going to be? And I'm already starting to see masses around HIV, which of course is a natural result of all of these jabs, people's immune system being affected. So how are you going to cover that up? Well, make the next virus HIV and everyone's got AIDS, but it's not to do with the jab, it's because there's a new virus on the loose. So that seems like an obvious one. Another obvious way to create fear is through scarcity, prices, money, not being able to get supplies, blame it on the truckers, collapsing economies. I mean, this is another thing written about in the Great Reset. How did they get rid of all the debt after the world wars? They inflated it away through hyperinflation. So if you've just been printing money like crazy and you've printed, I don't know, £1 trillion, if you want to hyperinflate that away, it essentially makes your currency worthless and everyone's savings are gone literally overnight. So, all of these possibilities, because we're dealing with corporates, and corporates are all about money and power and control. So this is the unfortunate result of 20, 30 years of consumerism. We've given a huge amount of power to that 1% minority, and they're now abusing that, and they will abuse it to drive this home. So we have to be just as resilient and as resourceful as we possibly can, so that we don't fall for any of whatever comes out. It's like in Gladiator, whatever comes out of that tunnel, if we stick together, we will be powerful.
Like I say, I don't want to get into predictions, but I do feel that there could be like a total collapse of fiat currency about to happen. Do you share that?
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing is, every central bank has created a digital currency. And obviously, so many people are already going into crypto like Bitcoin and Ethereum and all those things. And so every central bank has already created, every major central bank has already created its own digital currency, like the Bitcoin. So the natural, obvious thing would be to collapse fiat currency and replace it with a cryptocurrency, which of course is terrible news, because it's just another way of controlling us. So now suddenly everything you spend is tracked, and the government knows everything you spend and also can control everything you spend, so it's a nightmare scenario, which is why this is one of my big things that I've spoken about. We have to create strong alternative communities. We have to create strong alternative economies, so that we don't have to go to Tesco and get our fruit and veg. We can find people within the network where we can get everything that we need without having to resort to the corporate world, because it will be through the corporate world that they ultimately have power of that world. And so we can't be dependent on it if we want to be free.
Well, that's what I wanted to get into next, because personally, and I think there's a lot of people like me, where I kind of always knew I was here to bring in the new age. And when I was younger, that just sounded like a crazy thing to say. But when everything started happening in 2020, it's so much about myself, and my life really became clear as to why I'm here and all the things that have happened to me to kind of prepare me for this time. And I am so confident and so sure that this is all taking us into a new golden age. And I know that that's something that you share around, like you say, building new earth and building communities. So can you share with us some of the things you're doing practically and some of the visions for how you see these new communities starting?
Yeah, so I think this is very interesting, actually, because I did a talk on Tuesday night and someone was very kind of, if this is a new age talk, I'm leaving, sort of thing. But this new golden era, this quantum leap in evolution, this awakening of consciousness is actually a restoration of ageless wisdom. So we're actually restoring ancient wisdom, which has been lost through the whole industrial revolution, where we've just been obsessed with the 3D scientific world, and we've lost our connection to the higher dimensions, and we've lost our connection to nature. So essentially, this is a restoration. It's about restoring our connection to nature. It's about connecting, having that vertical connection to the higher powers, the higher dimensions. And so that restoration is a hugely important part of it. So that's why, technology is a great servant, but it's not a great master. So unplugging on our dependence from the digital world, getting back into nature, restoring our connection. So that's why, on a practical level, even though I'm recording videos and putting them out digitally, I always do them, if I can, in nature. I go and walk in nature just to create that contact. And there's lots of local communities here. I created a stand in the park in Bakewell last August, and we'd already created a local community support group. We tried to buy a farm last year, which we had to pull out of at the last minute, and we're looking at alternative land. But there's so many small groups of people who are now doing that kind of thing. Small communities coming together, creating eco communities, acquiring some land, getting self-sufficient, natural resources, growing their own food. And there's obviously people who are supplying that organic produce as well. So it's really about creating this whole network of an alternative economy and community, so that when you reach out to those communities and say, hey, I need some potatoes, there's a whole range of people within walking distance who say, yeah, I've got plenty, how can we share? And that's how we're going to get through this, through creating an alternative network. And it's going to be through the people. I mean, just look at what's happening in Canada. All of the people from all over the world sending money, people turning up with fuel cans and food, and it's a masterclass in collaboration and community spirit and human spirit. That's what's going to happen. That's what they're showing us the way.
So
and yeah,
two worlds running concurrently for at least another kind of 7 to 10 years, of like the old dying and the new being born alongside each other.
Well, it is like a metamorphosis, isn't it? So it's a great way to think of it, like this caterpillar that was consumerism, munching its way, getting fatter and fatter and fatter and fatter, which is like the corporate system. And suddenly this cocoon being spun through through this attempt to take it all, the caterpillar got really greedy, but it spun its own cocoon, and it's now inside this cocoon that it's spun, like in chaos, falling into chaos. And out of this cocoon is going to emerge this butterfly of this new golden era. And then that cocoon, the old system, and all of it's just going to fall away, like I'm no longer needed, fall away, and just it will be gone, and we'll be in a different dimensional. This is the awakening consciousness. It's like the difference between crawling on the earth and flying in the sky, so it's a quantum leap in human evolution. And so many people are working on thinning the veil and like puncturing, with torus fields of light. So many small ceremonies going on in secret throughout all of this, just creating little torus fields little like axis mundi, just like puncturing through the veil and bringing through the light, so what's happening is this dimension is just being flooded with light. And so we're seeing all the darkness, we're seeing in the labyrinth what was hidden before is now being, we can see it. It's like, oh my God, a bit like if you've got a really dark room and you come to decorate it and you turn the lights on and you start clearing it out and you realize how much dust and spiders there were in the corners, you know. It's all got to, you know, it's all being revealed, and a lot of it is not very pleasant, but it's all part of the process, because as we shine the light into the darkness and transmute that trauma and heal it and transmute it, alchemize it, we're healing the whole planet. And then at a level, it will suddenly be that quantum leap of evolution where it's almost like everyone gets it. And so it's not, a lot of people are like, oh, not enough people came to the event, or there's not enough people on the marches, the masses are still asleep, how do we wake up the masses? But this tipping point in any market, the tipping point is only about 15%. You don't have to get to 51% or 100%. It's a critical mass, like the 100th monkey syndrome. You know, my sense is that energy, like in popcorn, when you're cooking popcorn, the energy gets to a certain point where a few things pop first, and then there gets to a point where it all pops at once. And that's the energetic tipping point, you know, and that's when we're kind of there, actually. Everyone's popping, you know, and you can't, once they start to pop, it's difficult to stop it.
Brilliant, brilliant. So you've touched on it a little bit, but can you share with us some of your practices, your spiritual practices, your grounding practices, the things that you do that keep you sane and healthy and staying positive when it gets a bit dark?
Yeah, well, the number one thing for me is always just going out to nature, because, you know, especially I sometimes get into Telegram and I can feel myself being sucked into it and obsessed with it. It's almost like I'm looking for something. I'm just looking for the solution or the killer piece of information that is like, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm just being sucked into this digital world. And I just think I have to clear my energy and just go for a walk. And that's the great thing about having a dog as well. You don't get out of walking every day. So that is my number one thing, is going out into nature, I'd say. The second massive thing at the moment is I'm doing a lot of meditation with John Butler here in Bakewell, who's sort of set me, because I've done lots of meditation before, but usually it's in a ceremonial setting or with guided meditation. But this is very kind of pure, just sitting in stillness with a mantra and just practicing stilling the mind, you know, which is an art, because you can sit there and when you sit in stillness, you're aware of this turmoil of your thoughts, of like all this stuff just going on, and just allowing it all to settle and just to come back to that, like that still place, which is a real art. And in practicing that, it's very noticeable how much the system and the media is constantly shaking the snow globe. So it's very difficult, especially if you watch a lot of media, like, you know, mainstream media, constantly shaking the snow globe. So I'd say those two are massive. And obviously just simple things like eating nutritious, delicious food and things like juicing. And we did cacao at the weekend, which is beautiful cacao, natural, like plant medicines, you know, nature, getting back to nature, really, this alignment with nature, because this world that they have in store for us is totally digital and fake, you know, fake meat. And you know, just look at somewhere like Costa Coffee. It's just a temple to sugar, you know. So just becoming much more aware of things like, you know, what I'm eating, and getting lots of sleep, and just not, you know, looking after our immune system. Natural health as well is a massive one.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And so for people who might kind of be, I think this has been one of the issues of the past 2 years, is a lot of times you might kind of realize stuff and you have these understandings, but it's been the kind of maybe powerlessness of knowing what's the right way to act, especially when you have the understanding of it being, like you say, a spiritual war, and the peacefulness of it, and the kind of the non-resistance of it in a way being really crucial to it. So what would be the things that you would suggest to people if they feel like they want to get out and do something to kind of help progress the awakening, progress the movement? Are there groups that you recommend, or actions that people can take at the moment?
Yeah, so one really key thing to realize, and I really landed this through having trained in trauma healing for 3 years, is that this feeling of powerlessness in the face of overwhelming external threat is very much what, you know, childhood developmental trauma is. So we're tiny, we have this overwhelming external threat. It may be an abusive parent, it may be bullying brothers, it may be school teachers who are cruel, maybe bullies at school or whatever. It may have been an attack incident, a shock trauma incident. So what happens in that situation is that you end up with frozen trauma because you can't fight and you can't flight. So you have to freeze. And so that kinetic energy is frozen into our grid. So that huge amount of kinetic energy, which would have been used to fight or flight, is literally trapped in our energetic grid. So, and a lot of people creates a lot of tension and stress and anxiety. And so a lot of people, to try and salve that, will try to move to action or get rid of it somehow, or either numb it somehow through, you know, addiction or whatever. So the very best thing, if we want to move to action, the very best thing we can do is actually to work on resolving and healing that inner trauma by gently bringing it back online, fully feeling it and alchemizing it and loosening it and softening it, so that we can feel again. And that's a long process. So that's why stillness, somatic experiencing are really important to this process, because from that place of stillness, from that 0 point, what you find is when you get to this 0 point of stillness and this connection to all that is, you're like a hollow bone, the inspiration and the creativity and the action, the inspired action suddenly comes through. So it's a bit like drawing back a bow and arrow. It's like pulling back. And so if you pull back enough, when it comes to releasing that arrow, and focus, that arrow has a lot of velocity and is a very powerful, exact piece of action. So you can, instead of just crazily doing stuff, you're suddenly moving to inspired action, which might be writing a song, or it might be forming a local group, or it might be an amazing video that, like the one that I did, which just captured the imagination, and touched one person, touching 250,000 people, and the impact and the impetus that created. So it truly is about inner work. And there is a massive resistance to this idea of stillness, because people who want to just move into action and what do I do, when you say, well, do nothing, it's totally counterintuitive, and actually people get quite angry, because in truth most people don't want to fully feel. They don't want to go into all of that pain that they froze in childhood. So it's much easier to try and get rid of it through getting busy. So and so they'll say, well, you're not going to get anything done by meditating and going, oh, I'm on a mountaintop. But that's not the point of it. It's through that practice that you can then move to inspired action, which is much more powerful than just doing, just getting yourself busy, being a busy headless chicken, basically.
That's divine feminine to me. So you come into your divine feminine, and then your inspired action is your divine masculine. So
yes,
rises out of, like you say, you create the fertile soil
Yes.
earth, right? You create the terrain, and then that inspired action, just, you can't not make the video, or you can't not write the song, or it's just got to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's really effortless. Then it's really, really, when you come to that point where you're just moving to action through that point, that effortless of like, wow, yeah, I know. And I'm just, and then suddenly, and it all comes together very beautifully and synchronistically, and it's just doesn't feel like hard work at all. It's, you're in flow, you've got passion and excitement, and that comes through in the end product, and people love it and it resonates. And that's what I mean by like a really clean arrow that is very powerful, you know.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Rachel, thank you so much. It's been so great to benefit from your wisdom and all your insights. Where do you want to lead people? Where can they find you? Where should they look you up?
Well, probably the best place where I'm most active is my Telegram channel, Rachel Speaks Out. And I, you know, there's loads of content on there. So, and that will lead you in all sorts of places. And whenever I do a video, I always put it on there. And so it's got lots of news, and it's then got lots of my content as well. So it's probably a better place than going to my website, rachelelnaugh.com, which is a bit more static. So, because it's like a, you know, it's like a fast flowing river, isn't it, Telegram? And it's, I think Telegram's great fun. I love it. I much prefer it to Facebook. I'm not on Facebook anymore. I've kind of abandoned all of those old social media platforms. So I just don't want to feed that beast of, you know, Facebook, Google, YouTube, Twitter. I mean, they are part of the evil. So yeah, I love Telegram.
Much public speaking. Have you got anything coming up that people could see you at?
Not anything particularly coming up. I just did one in Stanton, which if you look on Rachel Speaks Out, the audio's on there. But yeah, I'm always doing things like this. So yeah, I'm always open to speaking if I'm called. Yeah.
Great. Well, hopefully we'll get to meet in person before too long.
Yeah, you're welcome to come to Bakewell, stand in the park as well. To anyone who's watching this, to meet me in person every Sunday morning in Bakewell, in the Bath Gardens, in the centre of town. It's always a fabulous group, a really wonderful core group of local people, and then people every week. People come from all over to join in, and it's really great fun. So that's another. You know, if anyone wants to meet me in person, I'm always there every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. to usually till 11:30.
Where is Bakewell?
It's in Derbyshire. So yeah, DE45 1BT is the postcode of the Bath Gardens. So yeah, and everyone's welcome.
All right, Rachel, thank you so much for your time.
Okay, lots of love. Thank you.